Unlocking growth, profit, and freeing up more time within your business is simply the result of planning and strategy. In this podcast, we physically draw out what that plan looks like for a trade business that's turning anywhere from 20K a month up to 300K a month. Tune in as we take a deep dive into the key areas that you need to focus on today in order to move that needle tomorrow. Enjoy the show. G'day listeners and viewers, welcome back to the Sideshow Podcast. You're joining us today for the second conversation I'm having with Rob from Prava Group in relation to how to structure your trade business. In episode 1, we went through some of the mindset and the structural conversations in relation to what it looks like in order to transition you as a business, or you from a tradesperson or a technician across to being a business owner. So in that episode, we talked a lot about mindset. We talked about org chart. We talked about recruitment, equipping your team, understanding what your forecasted org chart looks like, so on and so forth, meeting structure, and many other things. I encourage you to go check that one out. It was pretty insightful. And off the back of that, we're going to try something that we haven't done before. And if you guys are listening to this one via audio, we're going to do our very best to make it audio friendly. But Rob's actually got the old school flip chart out in front of us today. So if you guys want to watch this, I encourage you to head across to the Site Shed's YouTube channel, and you can actually follow along there visually. So, Rob, welcome back, mate.
Thank you, mate. And I love the old school flip chart. It's nothing better than getting pen to paper and drawing out for the guys.
Yeah, cool. No, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I mean, and again, we've sort of covered things in the past in previous episodes with organizational charts and so on and so forth. But it would be good to see, I think, for the guys out there that perhaps have been doing this a while, or perhaps it's completely new to, just to get a bit of perspective as to what this actually looks like practically. And so I'm pretty keen to see how you unravel this one.
Yeah, and I think this is really important because it's whenever I meet a business for the first time and we're really mapping out A, what their constraints are, and B, where they want to grow to, everything fundamentally comes back to structure. And I'm a big believer of that. And so it doesn't matter if you're doing 50 grand months, 75 grand months, 100, 150, 200 or more, this same structure applies along the way. So what I want to be able to do today is make it quite practical. And I want the listeners to be able to follow along for the journey as I draw out the structure, to be able to get them to overlay what their current state is, and then give them a practical exercise to be able to go, well, what's their next logical step? And who's my next logical hire? And if they've got the ability to be able to map that and see what that path looks like, it'll help them take them from where they are to where they want to be, not by working longer and harder and more hours, but how do we take that next hat off and hire that next person to be able to put that hat on? Mm-hmm. And so structure for me is fundamentally how you grow a business, because the structure of the business and how it's hung together from a people point of view is what unlocks the growth to be able to keep moving forward. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's map it through, and let's get the listeners to follow out. So if you've got a pen and paper for those listeners, come along for the journey. Now, it doesn't matter if a business owner is doing 60 grand months, 80 grand months, 100, 125, 150, 200, 250, 300 plus. This exact same structure follows all the way along. So it doesn't matter if you're doing, say, 750 grand a year or $3.5 million a year. This same operational structure applies all the way along. And that's the beauty of it. Now, in a zone here, there are a couple of different sweet spots that a trades business can get to. And there's a couple of ugly zones that they've got to be able to navigate through. Generally around 60 to 100 grand months, that's an ugly zone. That's what we call personally the hamster wheel. Anywhere between around 1.5 and 200K months, that's what we call the nightmare zone. That's another ugly zone. And then there's some real sweet spots in the middle here, depending on the size of the business and what it looks like. So every business has to navigate through these, and the way you do it is through getting your structure right. So pen and paper, let's draw it out. At the top of the tree of an organizational structure is always the general manager. Sitting underneath that, I always think in terms of what we call we want to think about functions within a business. Function number 1 is the admin function. Function number 2 is the accounts or bookkeeping function. Function number 3 is sales and estimation. And function number 4 is your operations. Then underneath operations is you've got team leader, tradesmen, apprentices, labourers, or trades assist. So that's that's a simple organizational structure of what it looks like. This can then be broken up into 4 areas. The bottom section around what we call your GC or your ground crew, your admin and your bookkeeping is your office crew, and your operations and your estimation is your ops/management. So this structure does not change. It doesn't matter. This operational structure, this organizational structure doesn't change whether you're doing $500,000 a year or $3.5 million a year or $5 million a year. It doesn't change. And that's the beauty about this structure. The thing that does change is how many hats that the owner is wearing through this process. What do you think, mate? Does that kind of make sense around how that works?
Yeah, sure. I'm curious to see as that whole conversation around having an org structure which is flatter than deep, is one that we've certainly been, working with over the years. But so I'm keen to see how this evolves. Again, I'm not a trade business anymore, but I'm definitely keen to see how this evolves. And I also like the what you just closed on there with how many hats currently the owner wears, because the reality is, guys, if this is new to you or you're just getting started, you're wearing all those hats. So, which is fine. And I think what fundamentally as well, what you're highlighting here within these different departments within the business, whether you like it or not, every single business has these departments. You can't just say all of a sudden, well, I don't want to have accounting, or I don't want to have, delivery or operations or whatever it is. Like, they all exist. It's just at the moment, you're probably just doing them all yourself. So having the ability and the clarity around breaking these things down visually, it's quite a empowering experience when you can define the different areas of your business, because once you do that, then you're like, actually, I know exactly what I need to take this off my plate, which I'm guessing is where we're heading with this.
Correct. Absolutely. And so when I meet a business owner, this is the first thing I do. I get the flip chart out and I go, right, let's draw up your structure. And for someone who's doing between, say, $750K a year and just over $1 million, where there's a lot of trades businesses that are like that, I'll say to them, okay, well, who does all the admin? And I'll pretend you run a plumbing business, and I'll go, all right, Matt, who does all the admin? M for Matt. All right, who does all the bookkeeping? Oh, Matt. Oh, I've got an outsourced person, so outsourced. Who does all the estimation, Matt? Oh, I do. Who does all the sales? I do.
Yeah.
Who manages all the guys in the team? I do. Are you on site? Yep, I'm the team leader. So we put your name there, and then you'll go, oh, I'm doing $1 million, and I got 3 tradesmen and 2 apprentices. And then I go, well, how does that make you feel? And they go, well, now I know why I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week, because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hats on my head. And that's a real aha moment. And it's a really important exercise that the listeners actually go through and put their names against the roles that they do, because then it's that real visual representation where they go, oh, I get it. Now I know why I'm stuck at 1 or 1.5 or $2 million and I'm not getting ahead, because I'm on the tools most of the day. I'm doing admin and bookkeeping at night. I'm pricing my work on nights and weekends. No wonder the business isn't growing, is because you're literally capped, and the owner has become the greatest bottleneck to success.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we get this structure drawn out like this then becomes the basis to be able to go, well, what's the next logical thing to be able to do to be able to hand over? Now, personally, the first areas that I go to, depending on the size of the business, The last areas I go to is estimation and operations. They're the last areas I go to. The first two areas I go to is administration, bookkeeping, and the ground crew. Because the principle is when you're restructuring a business, you think of low cost, low risk, and flexibility. It's easier to hire an admin person for $35 an hour part time, and that's lower cost and low risk and extra flexibility than being able to hire a supervisor part time when they're going to cost you $100,000+ a year. And so when you're restructuring a business, if the business is sub $1.5 million, the first go-to strategies that you want to do with a restructure is hire admin straight as quick as you can. And that doesn't have to be, if you don't have a warehouse or an office space, what COVID has taught us of late is that people can work from home and work in that space. And there's other companies out there who do outsourced administration and all those types of things. But the beauty around this by getting admin in place is you could get someone in for 20 hours a week, pay them $35 an hour plus super. That's $700 plus super per week. And if they're getting 20 hours a week, that gets that hat off their head. There's 20 hours of work that you are doing at nighttime or on weekends or just not getting to and doing a shit job that you convince yourself that you're your best admin person at. And then, yes, it only costs you $700 a week, but you've got the ability to redistribute that time. You're actually better off being on the tools and charging yourself out at $100+ an hour, or use that time to get a better quality life back, or redistribute that time to go and chase more work and grow your business. But what we're trying to do here is when you're looking at your structure, you have to think, well, where am I getting bogged down in low value tasks that you're not good at, you hate doing, and it's costing you in opportunities rather than time. And how can we make that higher so that we can take that hat off our head and hire the right person for that position so that they can fulfill that function? And that's what unlocks the next phase of growth. So when it comes to admin, you're spending $700 plus super to buy back 20 hours. But then you've got to be able to use that 20 hours to be able to redistribute that to either work on your business or to grow your business through better sales and estimation or job management. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Totally. That first hire as well is such a refreshing exercise, I think, for people, because although it seems scary, like once you've done it, you just think, how did I ever do this without them? I mean, I remember back when we started the podcast, I was running the agency and I was doing 3 podcasts a week. And I was like, how the heck did I do that? Like now we've got a full team that does all this stuff, you know? And like, I think that admin role is in pretty much every instance that I could ever possibly remember, every conversation I've ever had with any trade business owner, it's the admin stuff they friggin' hate and they don't know. And like, I mean, we've placed VAs in trade businesses, you know, that can take on some of these admin tasks for them, and it's a pittance in relation to what they could be earning in other departments in their business. It's a no-brainer, but it's that first step. It's that just jumping over that first hurdle, and once they're there, like, I get it.
Correct. And I think for a business owner and a trades business who's doing say 60 to 100-ish K months, the two areas that they have to look at in terms of structure is they've got to build out their ground crew. They've got to make the decision to get off the tools, because you can't run a business beyond $1 million if you're constantly on the tools all day long. You have to make that decision to be able to go, you know what, I'm going to start growing and running this business and run a trades business rather than being a tradesman who's got a business. And so making that choice to be able to start building out and optimizing your ground crew is the most important thing. So when it comes to structure of your ground crew, you've got to look at what are you the best at, and how do you start relinquishing that over time? And how do we build out that, whether it's apprentices, laborers, tradesmen, leading hands, what's that gaps that you're missing over the next 6 to 12 months that are going to really beef out your ground crew? And so when I'm mapping out structure with a client, I'm always thinking, what's my next logical hire now and the next one after that and the next one after that. Because remember, I said on the first episode, when you're scaling your business, you don't scale time, you scale team. And so you've got to think not just what's my next hire, but what's my next couple of hires beyond that. So over the next 12 months for someone doing between, say, 60K months and 100-ish K months, they might go, well, over the next 12 months, I'm going to wind back from being off the tools, and I've got to be able to get a tradesman in, an apprentice, and a labourer in. That'll wind me out. That'll wind back my days on the tools, and I can redistribute that to manage the sites better and chase more work and price more work. And they're my next logical steps that I've got to be able to take to be able to get off the tools, but hire more people to be able to get that work done. And I think that's the key to it.
I think as well that like this approach, when you've got a clearly defined path, very often avoids, well, maybe not avoids, but certainly reduces and mitigates the chances of you getting into a situation where you're hiring out of desperation.
Correct.
And I think that's a real issue that most businesses have. It gets to the point where they just hire someone because they can fog a mirror. So, when you've got this structure in place and you've got a solid recruitment process, it enables you to have the time to not rush these things. And, there's that whole conversation around always be recruiting and always be hiring and things like that. When you've got the structure in place and you know what you're going to be looking for at the next stage, you've got the time to do it. You're not forced into it. There's not as many surprises.
Correct. And so I think a real milestone, that's why I split these up into 3 categories: your ground crew, your office crew, and your ops management team. One of the first spaces you want to be able to do as a trades business is it's about winding yourself off the tools and making that choice that you want to get off the tools. And that's not for everyone. But if you want to grow a good business that's what we call a lifestyle business, you have to make that decision at some point to get off the tools. And so I think getting your ground crews right, but then the next space for me is always your office crew. And a lot of guys go, well, where am I going to find them? What are they going to do? Do I have enough work for them? All those types of things. I can guarantee that the moment a business owner puts on an admin person for the first time, they look back 6 months later and go, man, I wish I'd have done this 2 years ago.
That's
because so many people are getting bogged down at nights and weekends, spending precious time that they could be with their family doing $30 an hour tasks that they hate doing. And so it's about having the awareness around where's your time going and how can I relinquish that and put someone in that place who loves to do that work. And I think that's the key, is to be able to hire good people to do the work that you hate rather than trying to improve your weaknesses.
And I think once you do get to that point, and certainly in this scenario, I mean, I don't want to go down a rabbit warren here, so pull me back in if I'm getting off track, but this is probably the point where, and especially if you're bringing team members in that are remote, and it's my experience, and I've got a fair bit of experience with that. Our whole team is remote. If you don't have clear indications and you don't have clear, project management or things that person is supposed to do, deliverables, responsibilities, then it can be a real slippery slope to disappointment and disaster.
Correct.
So I would say that, the whole point of the org chart for us is to understand, well, what are the roles that you need to exist within the business, and then what are the responsibilities of that role, and let's document those responsibilities. And if we need to put some processes in place that we already know work, then we'll do that. If not, then we'll get the position underway, and then we'll develop those, like you said earlier, develop the processes as we go. But like for us, it's very much a case of, well, we would never ever hire anybody into the business that does not have a clear role and clear responsibilities within that role, and also have clearly defined outcomes. So we run the scorecard system, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. Jeff Smart book called Who, but essentially the premise is, everybody has clear outcomes that they're responsible for, and it's measured by a KPI, and that keeps people on track because they understand that they're doing the thing. So and then it also puts them in situations, and your team members in situations, and also yourself in situations where if somebody throws something on your table, you can look at your scorecard and go, I'm not going to do this because this isn't in my scorecard, and this doesn't add up to the main thing that we're focusing on here and driving towards. So we're going to shelve that for the next quarter or whatever it might be, or you delegate it to someone else or whatever. So it's a powerful exercise.
Yeah, correct. And I think they're all great systems, but like we spoke around in last episode, is you've first got to buy back the time to be able to roll out those systems and processes and scorecards. And so that's why I always run by the rule of position first. So get clarity on the position. Like, what is that position that I'm going to hire? We know that's a square hole. Now let's go to market and go, right, how do we find a square peg to fit in that square hole?
Sure, but surely you're identifying what the responsibilities are of that job. I mean, it's like, how would you're okay.
Yeah, correct. And then we go to market, we get them in, you buy back your 10, 15, 20 hours a week. Then you've got time. You like, I relieve the pressure valves. Now I've got time to worry about optimizations and efficiencies and systems and processes and all those types of things down the line. So that's why I'm a big believer that structure first. So people and positions first, and processes always come third. Generally for a trades business, I'm talking general terms here, a real sweet spot in terms of a structure for them is below that black line. And for that black line, for the people who are listening to audio only, it's generally around 125K months, which is generally around a $1.5 million business. I'm talking very general terms here. It's about a $1.5 million business. It means you as the owner, you're generally off the tools. You've got a good ground crew around you. You've got an admin person and a bookkeeper. And that admin person can be part-time. You'll be supported by a really good job management system. You'll have some good tech in your business, some good marketing in play, and you've probably got an office and warehouse space. And that $1.5 million mark to around the $2 million mark is a real sweet spot, because now you can funnel all the phone calls into your admin. They can be answering. They can be logging jobs into your job management system. They can be scheduling the guys and helping with ordering materials and running jobs and pulling together job packs. And there's so much that admin person can be doing. But generally between a 1.5 and a $2 million business, that's stage one of a really well-structured business. It's a good spot. I don't believe it's the best spot from structure, but in general terms, that's what I would want to see all trades businesses at least strive towards. Because in my opinion, anything less than that, you got a highly risky job with no leverage, and you can't go away on holidays because you're stuck doing the function of the business and you can never get away.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think that's been a pretty good exercise. So for you guys out there that this is relatively new to, or if you guys are out there and this has been a bit of a revelation, I'd love to hear some comments, wherever you see this coming across your feed, if it's social or in the newsletter or whatever it might be. And I'm sure, actually, have you got any workbooks or anything on this, Bobby, that you can leave behind?
Yeah, we do. Yep.
Yeah, cool. So we'll put something in the show notes for you guys to get hold of as well, so you can kind of follow along if you didn't get the chance to watch this visually.
I think we've probably, for those guys, there's probably one more step which I wouldn't mind talking to the guys who are doing just that little bit bigger. And then I think that'll round out the structure conversation really nicely.
Maybe one thing as well we can circle back to, Bobby, after you've spoken about that, is at what cadence do you revisit this?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Awesome. The answer to that is all the time, because you've always got to be unlocking your structure if you want to keep moving forward. Because when you get to that phase one, which is off the tools is phase one, office crews is phase two, it presents a new problem. Mm-hmm. And the new problem is that you're stuck doing all the pricing and all the management of work. You do have some support around you, so that's a good basic structure. But I believe the next step is the best structure for a trades business. And that's when you either go one way or the other, where you either hire a supervisor or you hire an estimator. Now, this comes down to the self-awareness of the owner to know what their strengths are. And you always hire your weakness, not your strengths. What I find is most trades owners are pretty good at pricing and winning work. Some guys are very good at operationally, so they like to outsource estimation and the pricing and that type of work. But what I find is probably 90% of trades business owners always lean towards more they want to hold on to that estimation because they know that that's the most important function of the business. Um, so getting to the next step is of what we call a lifestyle business is hiring one or both of those roles between operations and estimation. And it's often the hardest phase that a business owner has to go through, because you've got to go through that really ugly phase of spending a lot of money of an overhead point of view, and you have to increase your revenue with no bottom line result. And so what I mean by that is, to get a really good supervisor, you probably, especially there in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, you got to spend 100, 120 grand. You got to pay them super. You got to pay them a car. So you're looking at least a $150,000 package plus on costs. Say a business owner's on, say, 25% margin, including labor, they've got to make over $500,000 in revenue just to afford that person.
Yeah, this is where the labor efficiency rate really cuts through a lot of that stuff, which is really useful because it really says to gives you a transparent indication of, well, if we're going to hire this position, this is what we're going through with the team at the moment now. Because of course they're like, oh, we're so busy, we need more staff. I'm like, you don't need more staff.
Correct.
We can't afford more staff, and this is the reason why. Because they need to understand, in order to bring a new team member on, if it costs this much, the business needs to generate an additional X, and at that point we can bring someone on. But until that happens, it's not going to. That's not a reality.
Correct. And so that's why you've got to move from an optimized state through an unoptimized state. And that's why we call it the nightmare zone, because you're literally bumping your revenue by $500,000 at least with no extra bottom line. But what you do is, once you push through that, you get that support in around you. So, because then that means if you want to go on holidays, you've got admin around you, you've got your ground crew set, and you've got a project manager, maintenance supervisor, whatever your vernacular is. You know that the teams are being run while you're on holidays, and you can go and spend 2 or 3 weeks, and you know that customers are being looked after, jobs are being sorted, everyone's being set, and you're not tied to the business. And so that, from a structural point of view, that's why I say it doesn't matter if you're doing $60,000 months or $300,000 months. The structure does not change. It's just that as your revenue grows, you take off the admin hat, you take off the bookkeeping hat, eventually you take off the operations hat, and eventually you might want to hire an estimator and take off that hat. You go from doing everything operationally to leading everyone as a GM or selling GM. And that's why this structure does not change. It's just that as the business grows, your revenue goes up and your time in the business goes down. And so you go from doing everything to leading everyone. And eventually you get to the point where you're doing $250,000, $300,000 months, and you've got an admin, you've got a bookkeeper, you've got an operations person, you've got an estimator, and you've got a very, very well optimized operational structure, which is a true lifestyle business, because then you've diversified your risk, you've got key people in key positions, and the business is really starting to work for you rather than the other way around. And so that's why I say that structure underpins your growth, because as you move up through the revenue category, the revenue run rates, as you move up, your structure just evolves, and you just take hats off your head, and the extra revenue just affords to pay for all those people.
Yeah. No, it's great. Mate, this has been awesome. So I know there's a lot to take in for everyone out there that, listening this or watching this. And, it is, again, it's something you can learn. Like, don't go cross-eyed and glaze over with this stuff. Like, it is important. And, I can't encourage you guys enough to reach out to Bobby and, become part of his program over there, because they obviously have a really good framework for helping you guys define these things, but again, just, you got to want to learn it. So, make sure that if you're going to take that step and you're going to put your hand out for help, you're going to want to have to do that. It's got to come from inside. Mate, thanks so much, Rob, for all your time here. It's been awesome. Always love having you on the show. Wealth of knowledge. I'm going to put links to all your website and stuff over there. But for you guys that don't know, Rob's from Prava Group, Pravar group.com. And Rob's going to leave some resources behind for you in the show notes in the space of maybe an org structure resource or something like that. Yeah. Anything you want to close on, mate?
enjoy the journey and enjoy building out those teams. And this is what sets people free and gets their lives back rather than being a slave to their business all day long. And I think structure's that key. So enjoy that process and be ready for it.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing as well. Like so often we can just get bogged down in business with things, and if you zoom out and you realize what you're doing and what you're working toward, and this is why strategy is good, right? Because if you've got a clearly defined strategy, and you can see that you're taking the steps towards it, when you zoom out and when you get your head out of the shitty day you've just had or the shitty phone call you got from a client or whatever it might be, when you can focus on the bigger picture and you can see and you can measure and you can gauge progress, it does sort of bring it full circle. And so, having that strategy in place and having like this sort of doing these kind of exercises, it really does make the whole process more enjoyable. And like business is lonely, like you can't go to your staff members and talk to them about the problems that you're having. Like it's a lonely landscape. So, I always encourage you guys to, you know, build a good team around you, and have people in your corner that you can bounce ideas off, which is why we love having you on the show, Rob. Thanks again.
Yeah, I think what the listeners need to do is, whether it's with us or whether another coaching organization or whatever it is, take the time to sit down with someone and get the help to map where they're going over the next 12 to 24 months. And I think just get that help to map it out. And I think if you can get clarity, don't sit there spinning your wheels. Take the time to get clear on what that direction is. Like, if for those who want to grow and improve their business and their life, clarity is key. So whether it's with us or another coaching organization who sits around here in the site shed, and there's plenty of good coaches around, just reach out to someone and get some help with whoever resonates with you the most, and get clear on your direction and know what levers to pull. Because then when you pull those levers, life becomes a hell of a lot easier, because you're not in that state of confusion of knowing where to go. So take the time, strategize well, and get to work putting and making these positive changes, and you'll thank yourself for it in a couple of years' time.
That's awesome. Thanks very much, guys. And that is a wrap. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Please hit that subscribe button, get your notifications turned on so you get notified of our upcoming episodes, upcoming content, so on and so forth. And please do me a favor, share this video with someone else and leave us some of your experiences in the comments. We would love to hear them.